Hi, I'm Tony Russo, and this is In Case You Missed It from Kates-Boylston for the week ending Friday, September 20th, 2024. First up, I want to talk about a feature that's in this week's Funeral Service Insider, the newsletter. You can click on the link in the show notes and go to Funeral Service Insider, the newsletter, the part of the website. And even if you're not a subscriber, you get 3 free looks, and this is a story that you may want to look at. And also, when you go to the Funeral Service Insider section, all of the In Case You Missed It stories are free, so you can click on the stories from there. You can see the other stories that we run. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but we don't always put everything in on the video that we have on the website. The website is the repository of all things, so you can just check in on that. One of the things that we don't really talk about here on the In Case You Missed a Video, but that appear and are very popular on the website, are the funeral director obituaries. When a funeral director of note is eulogized in the newspaper, I like to share that on In Case You Missed It. We rewrite a shorter version to kind of give you the gist, and then if you wanted to do a deeper dive into the complete obituary of that funeral director, there's always a link to do that. The story that I want to point out this week is about Dana Mariner, who spent a career, 15 years as a funeral director, and then suffered from burnout and decided to step back. And when she decided to step back in, she elected to open a pet aquamation facility. And I've spoken with several people over the last 2 years that have done very similar things, gone on to pet, either cremation or pet aquamation as a sideline from their current business, which is often done, as far as I know, is always done with the blessing of the business owner, or sometimes they strike out on their own, or sometimes it's a combination of all of those things. So, reading her story or talking to her for her story, reading it, hopefully you'll get the same impression. Sometimes you have to find a way to be a funeral director that fits you. And if it doesn't fit the companies that you're working for, then sometimes you are better off starting your own or finding another way in. For her, she was doing 450 calls a year, which is a lot. She was sitting down with 450 families a year, and that's a lot over the course of 15 years. And yeah, I think it'll tire you out. And I think if you're doing that kind of thing, you know how tiring it can be. So it's an inspiring story, but it's also one where there's some interest in how she got everything done and the choices that she made to get to where she is. So link to that in the show notes. Before I go much farther, I do want to talk to you about our upcoming event. It is Advances in Funeral Innovations. It is November 12th and 13th in Houston, Texas, and we're real excited about it. We have all sorts of speakers coming to speak about all sorts of things. I feel like if you're a listener, you may have caught Tyler Anderson's bonus episode earlier this week, and we'll have more bonus episodes to kind of give you a teaser. But if you're already convinced and you would like to come and you would like a discount, I wanted to give that to you right up front. The discount code is FSI Podcast, all one word, all caps, and that will get you $50 off the $197 registration fee. The $197 is an early bird special, so the price goes up on October 1st to $247. Either way, if you're listening to this in mid-October for some reason, no problem. You can still get the $50 off by punching in FSI Podcast at checkout. This is kind of an update from a story that we spoke about last week about Park Lawn acquiring a bunch of funeral homes, or some new funeral homes, as their kind of reintroduction into the acquisition market. One of those funeral homes, the Wilkerson Hatch Bailey Funeral Home in Waco, Texas, is had a story done on them letting people know that they weren't closing. And the reason that's important is because these messages get out, like there's something going on, tends to become something is closing. And it's not just with consolidators. We have another story this week about a gentleman in Alabama, not far from Birmingham, David Skelton, who also has sold his funeral home to another private individual. But they did, David has been in the business for 51 years and he's staying on board. And those kind of stories, I think, are really important for the community in a community newspaper, which is why I feel like it's worth sharing, because you can follow up and call the local newspaper and say, hey, a lot of people have been calling asking if we're closing. We're not closing, but we do have a new owner. If you'd like to do a story, we'd be happy to tell you about it. And that's a good way to approach a publication without sounding like you want, a free ad about your new business, which is a continuing business. So check out the links to those in the show notes. Another and similar one is in New York, the Hardison Funeral Homes. They operate in Lewiston and Ransomville, New York. Their funeral home owner died. Mr. Hardison died actually in November, and they've been looking for a replacement. Now, he has successors. They're going to keep the funeral home in the family, but the people in the family aren't funeral directors, so they decided to hire a general manager, and they hired a man named Scott. I couldn't think of his first name. Scott Vendetta, who has been with Armagon Funeral Homes, which we've mentioned before. They've had their own issues with getting a crematory open. I don't know if you remember from earlier in this year, but he's moved over as general manager, and the idea is that he is going to run the show, and the children who have inherited the grown children who have inherited this business are going to come into it in their own time, and then they'll decide, if they're not getting funeral directors licenses, whether they want to eventually either transition out of the business or continue to hire people to run their business for them. That's something that would be interesting to know if you're someone who owns a funeral home but pays people to run it for you. What was that decision like? I know there are a couple of them. We've done stories on them before. It's interesting to think of staying in the business even though you don't have literal operational experience with sitting down with families or with embalming or with arranging in general. But you understand that it's a business worth being in. It's an interesting question as this problem of succession continues for aging funeral directors, and again, for people like Mr. Hardison who die unexpectedly. His family. I mean, his sister's running the business part of the business or helping to run the books, but the transition could have been a tough one, which is why they said, we've got a new guy coming on. He's going to do some new things, but we're still a family-owned business and we're going to stay that way. And again, worth reaching out. We've talked about this on previous episodes a lot, this idea of earned media. And these transitional announcements are the best kind of earned media because, as I said earlier, you can call the newspaper or the television station, one of these is a television station story, and say, hey, people have been calling us and asking. I don't know if they've been calling you, but here's the answer to the question that's on people's minds. And that makes the story a little bit more interesting than, hey, we're doing something new, you should write about it. And that's coming from somebody who gets a, hey, we're doing something new, you should write about it email about every 12 minutes. So those are not as interesting as people are asking us, and we want to let them know why we're doing what we're doing. We so rarely get to report on good crematory news in the local papers that I definitely wanted to share this one about a crematory in Las Vegas, New Mexico, where the city council upheld the zoning council's vote to allow a crematory to open in town. It passed 3-1. And the next steps, of course, are to try to get this done. It was for the Gonzales Funeral Home, which had an earlier approval and then had trouble getting the crematory up and running. So they had to withdraw and reapply. And God bless them, they got lucky. They reapplied. And even though people came to say, that crematories kill our children and poison our water and whatever they say, when they come to these meetings, they were able to get it through, and they're going to be able to open their business. So I'm glad about that, and that's why I thought it was a story worth sharing, and a link to it, as with all the stories, in the show notes. And in the less happy news about crematories, there is a crematory in Kentucky that works on the Kentucky-Indiana border called Cloverport Funeral Home. It is in Western Kentucky. And they have been fined $2,000 for each of the 290 unauthorized cremations that they have made under this current suit from the Attorney General. And the question isn't about whether or not they did the cremations. It's a little slipperier than that. It's not a lot nicer, but it's not egregious. They allowed families to believe that their loved one was being cremated locally, when actually that loved one was being sent to a central cremation facility. And, we talked about the pet cremation earlier in the show, and cremation in general is something that we talk about with some regularity. And this is one of the reasons that having an on-site crematory or aquamation facility is such a benefit, because these stories just are coming out more and more. And once consumers start asking, where is my loved one going to go, then it's in the zeitgeist, and people know that you might be moving your decedent to another place to have the cremation done. And that is, it's okay. It's what most people do, but to go with that, it's, I think, important to have a very, very clear tracking ability for families to know that, yes, now their loved one has gone to this place, and now the process has been completed, and the loved one has been returned, and everything is cool. Because when they find out on their own, they think something's up, whether or not something is. Now, if something is up, then you deserve what you get. But if something is not up, then it can cause, I think, friction that's unnecessary. So, I don't think that it is ethical, and I don't think that you think that it's ethical to let families come to believe that their loved one is going to be staying on your property, when in fact it goes and they go and come back. So just a cautionary tale. That's a lot of money to spend on not doing things the right way. And there's only a matter of time when you do something like this that is demonstrably icky, if nothing else. It's only a matter of time before someone points it out, before someone says, hey, this is going on and we don't think it's right. And no sense getting caught up in that if you don't have to. That will do it for this week. In case you missed it, is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo. And if you are listening, then please subscribe where you're listening. If you're watching, then please subscribe where you're watching. If you are on our website doing either, click to the link and subscribe on the podcatcher or YouTube watcher of your choice. If you're on YouTube watching this, consider subscribing, only because this isn't the only thing we do. We put out webinars with some regularity, and we put out little short videos of previews for different things that are going on. And of course, it's important to, at this point, remind you that we have an event coming up. It is the Advances in Funeral Innovations Conference in Houston, Texas, November 12th and 13th. And if you are listening to me and you want to come and you would like $50 off, put in the code FSI Podcast, all one word, all caps, at checkout, and you'll get $50 off. For now, the price is $197, and that will go to $247 on October 1st. Either way, the discount will work, but if you know you're going, book it now and get the discount while you can. If you're watching this in October, the discount is still good, and we would still love to see you in Houston. And that is all for this week on In Case You Missed It from Kates-Boylston.